weekend long, my eyes were glued to the standings to watch Levia make top 8. One by one, they fell, but one man, Mark Cornett, snuck his way into a win-in for top 8, unfortunately bubbling out at 11-3. Today he joins the league to preach the gospel that is his Aggro Levia deck. Prepare yourselves, my pulpings, because we've got Mark Cornett in the house to walk us through a Levia deck that he took all the way to 10th place, like literally on the bubble for US Nationals. And this was just like so exciting to experience. I don't know if anyone in the audience really got to see it the way that I did running the stream and all that, but I'm watching the standings like nonstop, trying to watch where's Chris Iali? You know, like is he doing well in Levia? He had all this hype, he just won the Progress, but there's Mark Cornett going up and up and up in the standings until literally winning in situation. You did everything right. You were right on the bubble, ended up at 10th. But it is such a pleasure to have you here because the entire Levia world was like really rooting for that big finish. And honestly, 10th was really, really impressive anyway. So Mark, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me, Ethan. And I've got to say, I was ecstatic throughout the entire tournament. The casting was awesome from you guys. And just as I was playing through the games, it was just, everything felt right.
Yes.
And I'm just so happy to have made it that far. Top 8 would have been great, but top 16 is more than I had ever hoped for.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, huge congrats. And this is a really important video, I think, because, of course, U.S. Nationals came before all the other Nationals that are rolling out. So we're trying to get this done quick because you did something that not a lot of people are expecting, and that's bringing back Aggro Levia. Honestly, it's like a play style that I personally have not touched in a long time, especially in like the heavy hitters meta, and even a little bit before that, like running the tear limb from limbs. You've gone back to the pulping and wild ride core, this Aggro Levia. So we're going to get to the deck in just a second, people, but we want to learn a little bit more about you, Mark, because funny enough, I used to know you more as a local back when I lived in Michigan. So where exactly are you in Michigan these days, and how's your local scene?
So I'm still in Grand Rapids, still playing with the old crew, Clark, Nathan,
Nice.
you know, our guy. And I'm playing at Legends currently. We actually have a very strong, like, local crew. We have a very good Prism player. We have, well, sorry guys if I don't shout out everybody, but we have a lot of good competition. Josh, still love Tarek, our crazy pummel player. And Tyler, a fantastic judge. Love the guy.
Oh yeah, Tyler
And
Luce. He was actually there working as well. So what a representation from Michigan. Nathan made top 8, of course. We had you right at 10th. Tyler judging as well. I saw Clark doing like really well day 1. What a, you know, seeing all the Michiganders do so well just warms my heart. I really miss you guys out there. So give everyone a big hello for me. Or if you're watching the video, hello, my old friends. But what is your history specifically with Levia?
I have been a tried and true Levia player since Monarch. I've been working on the deck little by little. Just this deck is the culmination of over a year of just trying it to get the ratios right. Like, it is a labor of love.
Sweet. Well, you know what? Then let's rip off the Band-Aid for the people and reveal the deck list itself. Because, like you mentioned, this is a labor of love, right? You put a lot of work into it. So walk us through generally, now that we actually have it on screen, like what is the game plan? What have you crafted with this Levia deck?
So I'd like to start with a quick rundown of what came before Nationals and before the our friend in the right side came into play from Mistvale. But we had this core deck that actually used to include all 3 Swing Big, Pulpings, and Wild Rides. And we had the numbers down to around 42 6s in the main. And the whole game plan was send at least 12 damage per turn and block when, and this might sound cocky, but convenient.
Mm-hmm.
So the game plan was to essentially make it so the opponent could never stuff your graveyard, to continuously fill and dig deeper to find your power cards such as Ardivore, Bloodrush Bellow, and now we have things like Shadow Realm to just shore up and have that crazy spike turn. But I actually took this to my road to nationals and qualified on it, going completely undefeated in Swiss, and only got taken down in a rematch against the KO I faced earlier in the game. So he knew my deck, and he was able to edge me out. I missed lethal on our top 4 match
Oh no.
to win and get to the dash that I would have hopefully taken out. But that was my qualifying run there for Road to Nationals. And then right after that, during the ProQuest season, I took 2 PQs, once again going undefeated in Swiss, and then only losing in the finals to a Prism and a Katsu that absolutely killed me in one turn from almost 40.
Oh boy.
And yeah, but this is kind of the evolution of it once Mistveil came out. So
Right. So
you have your
what did you shift kind of going towards the Shadow Realm horror route? Did anything change specifically around this card, or have you treated it just as like another go again piece that slots in without thinking too much?
So there was actually a few things I had to test. I used your list as kind of a baseline for a short period of time, and I liked a few of the pieces. But for how aggressive this deck is, the one that I have, I couldn't find slots for the Command and Conquers and Send Packings, and really I wasn't comfortable with that 3 cost on Send Packing. Disruption is not as important in this deck than to race your opponent down as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I went back to the drawing board of my list, added in the snags to help with the new matchup, which is very rough, and then cut one singular swing big from the list, removed the Hungering Slaughterbeast Reds from my sideboard, and moved one of each Pulping and Wild Ride to the side for matchup switching.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like switch hitters. In some matchups, you bring all 3 Pulpings in because they don't run D-reacts, and in others, you bring the Wild Ride in because you're expecting them to try and stuff you on them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so interesting. You mentioned that like the 3 cost was really kind of worrisome for you in the deck, and I do notice in terms of ratios at this core 60 that you've got for us, you are at 19 blues, which is generally a little bit less than I'd say the floor of Levi list tends to be about 20, and normally pushing it up to about 23 is kind of the range that a lot of Levi's live with. So you've got it at 19. How does that cost curve kind of affect what you're doing turn by turn? Are you always looking to like still work off of a blue, or have you shifted over towards being comfortable with more yellows? I mean, I do see there you still have like ample 2 costs. Obviously, these do cost 2 innately, but generally that's not all you're trying to do with your turn, right? So how are you using kind of a 19 blue base?
So the turn, the blue base ended up being cut ever so slightly from 20 to 19 due to Shadow Realm Horror. I wanted to have that one additional 6, and I ended up kind of fitting in 2 with the pseudo 6 of our Diabolic offering that was brought in place of my second Tear Limb from Limb copy that was in my main board. And that gave me an additional 1 cost to pair up with everything and allowed me space for the singular copy of Hungering Slaughterbeast to get that 1 more yellow into the deck, that 1 more yellow 6. And that has ultimately been, in my opinion and experience, the right decision, because even when you don't get a blue in a hand, there are times where you just need to keep up pressure. So 2 yellows and, say, a Dread Screamer and a Graveling Growl is still perfectly functional, even though you're not getting that free arsenal or that extra blocking card.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. As long as the hand is functional, right, then you're hitting the right numbers you're looking for. And it's really interesting that you point out the blue had to shift to just be a 6. Like that card slot wasn't just tossed away for some random tech. It went to filling out another ratio that the deck is looking for, and that is the 6s. And I think that becomes even more critical, not just because of Shadow Realm Horror being added, but because of the draw discards. You need more functional 6s so that you can expect these things to actually hit. And I remember your post on the League of Levia, you mentioned some percentages that you're working with around Pulping Wild Ride, if you can talk a little bit towards that.
Right. So there is kind of a game plan with Wild Ride and Pulpings that needs to be kept in mind when you're playing this build. Whenever you have a Wild Ride and Pulping and are planning to definitely send it, you want to always have the other two cards in hand or be looking to arsenal it for the next turn. Because if they do whiff, it can absolutely ruin your turn. But with the addition of the other go again pieces we have now, you don't always have to send them first. They don't always have to be the leaders on the go again train.
Good
So
point.
with the Dread Screamers and Shadow Realm Horrors, we can lead with those and then hold it, pitch your second blue. If you have that double, send the Shadow Realm, send the Pulping, and at worst, you're getting a Claw after that to send a 4 card, what is that? 13, 16 damage.
Yeah.
Like, and that's your minimum. When Shadow Realm hits, you get absolutely crazy turns where you can send a follow up of a Graveling Growl from Banish
Hmm.
or a Swing Big because it doesn't care if it's a shadow card, it just cares that it's a 6. You can follow it up with a Swing Big to send Blood Rush Bellow level turns on turns that are not power turns.
Wow, great point. That's actually, that's a play that I don't like to play with Wild Ride and Pulping too much, but when they are in the list, that is the kind of play line that I'm always searching for. I want to have Blood Debt off before I'm taking a risk with something like Pulping, and what you just articulated is so exactly that, right? Like Shadow Realm Horror lets you play those kinds of hands even more. This is a really smart addition to kind of use Shadow Realm Horror to now catapult like more options into the deck with these kinds of go-agains that look risky, but actually are less so because you're leading the turn, turning off Blood Debt. That's very smart, Mark. But there's one thing that does trip me up about one of your inclusions around Shadow Realm Horror, and that is Mark the Beast. So I want you to kind of explain here. There's obvious synergy with Mark the Beast being discarded with Pulping and Wild Ride. That's going to turn off Blood Debt. Right, like now, if you are leading with your turn on some draw discard, you just don't have to worry about Blood Debt anymore. But there's the anti synergy with Shadow Realm Horror whenever the Mark of the Beast is kind of that extra 6 in your hand, the 6 that you otherwise would have blocked with. Now it's a 6 that critically isn't going to your graveyard to fuel Shadow Realm. So how do you feel about kind of the pros and cons of Mark of the Beast in this list?
So the pros and cons were considered. Ultimately, that draw discard effect and the ability to hold it on a Blood Rush turn or on a Wild Ride or a Pulping turn and have the possibility of Blood Debt being off before you even see what you get off of the top of the deck is rewarding. It's kind of a flex position in the deck. And the way this deck runs with all of the draw discard effects within it, and, the Art of Wars, the Blood Rushes, you're never actually punished for having the Mark of the Beast, go directly to banish. It's almost like always gravy. In
Hmm.
fact, I've had back during the Road to Nationals and ProQuest turns where I only had 3 Blood Debt when I flipped into Blasphephet, and all 3 of them were Mark of the Beasts that I had played or blocked with during the game because the way the deck cycled, those were the pieces that actually came through all of the draw discards, I was cycling like a Blood Rush.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just had that Mark of the Beast in Banish for the flip to be my chain ender with the other go again pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see people cutting it down to maybe 2 copies, but from my experience, the ability to go directly to banish actually is a benefit, not a downside. Because some turns you don't want to clear 2 sets of 3 from your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
If you play a Dread Screamer and then your follow up is Mark of the Beast, yeah, you only filled the grave 1, but you only cut it down by 3, while also still sending 12 damage. And it
Hmm.
also follows up Wild Rides and the rest of the crew without causing other problems with the deck. I've enjoyed Mark of the Beast. It's also a good panic button when you get into those situations where you do get stuffed on graveyard, which is rare. But you can just play it out and then just block on the next turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely pros to this card. It obviously fits in like the agile windup curve, and even if this is all you're sitting on and banish when you flip consumed, I think your deck more than most will use a 2-cost curve like that to still do pretty ridiculous things, rather than looking for the 1 costs in your consume flips that when you draw Dread Screamers, you can like 2-card 12 basically. What you can do with like the Pulping Wild Ride is potentially, keep that double blue Pulping Wild Ride hand and go Pulping, Claw, now mark the Beast Chain Ender, and it all looks so clean just due to the cost curve of this deck. So it makes a lot of sense to me, and I got those extended arts. I'm happy to slot them back into the deck when I start experimenting with this. But I wanted to then talk a little bit about how you're using the Demi Hero for this deck specifically, because it's obviously more aggressive than normal, which means consumed probably is what what you're playing for. But sometimes when you add a lot of these non-blood debt aggressive package, like you mentioned before, you just don't have that many cards with blood debt even flipped. So how are you normally getting value out of the Demi Hero out of this deck?
So I found generally the same way most of our, Levia community is. You find those turns, and in my case, you kind of can find them a little more easily because of the pulpings and wild rides. I'm targeting, just like most of us, to get down to, 15 to 14 life, but I have more lines that allow me to actually go into consumed without reducing my damage numbers. Pulping and Wild Ride can allow you to block with a card, pitch for your pulping, draw a discard. If you do keep a blue in hand from that, if you had the blue and it hits the one off top, allows you to go pulping, claw, flip, which most of the time at that stage of the game is enough to at least get a card or two out of their hand, or not, but you're still sending the numbers you want to be sending each turn while still getting that crazy spike of power from turning into Blasphephat.
Yeah, that's a great point. A 3-card 12 while still flipping is normally only going to happen if like you've been sleep darted or something, and you can still play your Dread Screamer turns and flip. So that makes a lot of sense. You've got it built into your deck to still have those kind of insane rates into a flip, and that's a lot of damage. That's a lot of oppressive threat because generally at that point of the game, if life totals are relatively equal, you're flipping to 13, your opponent just faced down 12. Are they now in reckless swing range? Like, what is going on? So I get the sense it's a lot of pressure. And then you, unlike a lot of Levi's, actually, I don't know about a lot of Levi's, but at least me, I just took Reckless Swing straight out of my deck because I just hadn't lost in so long that Reckless Swing just would have been a blank card for me. But you did run it here. So how do you feel about Reckless Swing in your blue base and generally just kind of your blue count overall? How do you feel?
So Reckless Swing, for me, it is kind of that comfort piece, and it can be a miss, but what are you going to replace it with? You could replace it with Diabolic Offering for that one more, but that doesn't even block. And I did it one time in this tournament, block with a Reckless Swing to kill my opponent. It was actually in my last round.
Oh, wow.
I could have probably won doing something else, but, you take the guaranteed kill. I still like it. The threat of it when your opponent does see it pitched does give them that thought, Like, I'll announce it, pitching Reckless Swing, and it gets it into their head. Like, I don't just say pitching a blue, I'm pitching Reckless Swing. So they know it's in the deck, but they don't know how many I have.
That's huge. I like
Bit of
this
mental damage.
battle, yeah, that you're waging there. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to start doing that now. I've got to run it like literally just for that. Mind games are huge. But how do you feel about kind of the way the rest of your blue base shook out? Because you've trimmed down to basically 2 ofs in every slot that isn't the 6s that we get to run, and I guess the Dread Screamer, which is more go again. So how did you land on kind of the 2 of count in these flexible blues?
It ended up being a lot of small decisions. I could not get myself to remove the convulsions because when you do run into those fatiguey matchups, just having that built into the blue base to, play convulsions into a yellow Graveling for 7 dominate has won me many games. Barraging Beatdown, it's funny. It's such an innocuous little card, but when you follow it, when you play it after you've played a go again piece and they, maybe block down with 2 cards in the late game, you play it, they go down to the 1 card in hand, and that can sometimes just kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Like a Prism, you might just take away their last blocking card and make it so you just have true damage. And Smashback, I would love to take Smashback Ailhorn up to 3 copies,
Mm-hmm.
but that 2 block is enough of a liability that I couldn't make myself put the 3rd copy in. I don't know. Like, I like my numbers being, clean. I try to minimize those 2 blocks and those pearls as much as I can without losing power in the cards I'm playing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So ultimately it ended up being a 2-2-2 spread between those like 6 blues, and the rest to me are, in my opinion, pretty standard for our Levia deck techs.
Mm-hmm.
The Dread Screamer blues, they're just good flexible pieces to continue going wide. Doomsday is an all-star. If you're ever able to play it, your opponent has to deal with it, or it feels like the game is free at that point. If they
Mm-hmm.
don't deal with Plasma Fet, it's kind of like, especially in this deck, go again, go again, go again, free 6 for a 4th chain link. Whew.
Sweet. Well, there's another part of this deck that is different than what I've been doing recently, which is Hooves of the Shadow Beast for me has become basically a mainstay equipment piece. And what it really comes down to for what I was struggling with in Shadow Realm horror versions of the Levia is that if you're all in on crafting a Shadow Realm turn, but the Shadow Realm hits 2 misses instead of 2 hits, then I wanted the safety net of Hooves of the Shadow Beast to just make my turn exactly what I was planning to. I made all my blocking decisions around Shadow Realm hitting, but if it doesn't, I want to be able to click the Hooves button and still play exactly what I was planning to do. You've opted, however, to run Scabskin Leathers as like your main board piece. How do you feel Scabskins works in the deck? How often are you rolling, and do you kind of miss that Hooves button?
So, great question. I actually love the point you made about the Hooves of the Shadow Beast to just get that action point back when, Shadow Realm misses. The funny thing about this deck is I've never had issues with Shadow Realm Horror getting those 2 pieces because I'm constantly filling the graveyard and crafting my turns with other go again sources as well. So for me, Scab's extra blocking, especially in a meta where we have characters like Zen who can just blow up the entire game off of 1 turn, that extra 3 health has mattered a lot in many games. But in terms of the actual rolling, I love it into Enigma. I love it into Prism, and I
With
have
gamblers,
loved
right?
it.
With gamblers.
Oh, yes, of
Okay.
course.
Phew. My goodness.
um, but I also do like occasionally, even with a deck this heavy on the go again and the draw discard plays, occasionally you do run into difficult hands on those first 2 turns of the game to actually apply real pressure. And occasionally you'll just roll Scabs on turn 1, where worst case scenario you Arsenal pass on the 1, but getting that second action point can double your effective turn. And on turn 0, turn 1, or even after you've already turned off Blood Debt, when you can double, even if you don't have Gambler's Gloves. I actually had a turn against the Zen where I went Dread Screamer, and I had a hand that could convert, I believe it was Mark of the Beast into Shadowpeed. If I rolled 2 action points, and if I did not, I just Arsenal the Slithering and move on. Rolled 1 action point, just sent out the Slithering, moved on from there. But it would have been another 6 damage, which could have mattered in that game. That would have I didn't have access to with the Hooves because I needed that block.
No, it makes sense. So then, overall, how often do you think you actually use Scabskins during your tournament run for
I
rolling?
believe outside of the Enigma matchup, I rolled 4 times.
Wow.
And
So over like 7 games, you think 4 times 7 games?
out of the 8 game. Oh no, actually out of the 6 games,
6
4
games.
times.
Okay, so 2. You faced 2 Enigmas on.
2 of them were on turn 1s or turn 0s, where if I had rolled the extra action point, I could have sent 12 damage at my opponent and forced them to have all 3 blocks, to try and leak. And the other 2 were after I'd already turned off Blood Debt. So I sent a Dread Screamer, and I had the potential for then sending either 7 or 13 after that.
Hmm.
And to me, rolling at that point is always worth it.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's going to be eye-opening because I think a lot of people, when they look at an Aggro Levia list, assume that Scabskins are being used a lot more than a typical list. But it seems like you're pretty reserved, and a lot of that is just baked into how much natural go again is already happening in the deck anyway. And so, you know what? I'm not a huge Scabs believer, but I think you really have convinced me on the draw discards right now. But I noticed that you named the deck No News is Good News, and yet I would think that the more proactive graveyard fill you add, the more you're trying to help that matchup specifically. Just, proactive graveyard fill, not having to worry about blocking stealth cards, right? So talk to me a little bit about your sideboard process in general, and also why News specifically is still so scary for this deck.
So for me, the new matchup is so difficult because of two things. The graveyard removal, the pinpointed graveyard removal, it's not so much the fact that she's adding to the blood debt pile, because I have felt like I can turn off blood debt pretty consistently in most games, even into new. But it turns into a game of do you have it with the new, and not so much a game of how much can I do to actually hurt you. When they have the transcend and can just take a card from your hand, it feels really rough to even make blocking decisions because I'm trying to go wide with this deck. I don't have as many 2-card hands that are actually what I'd consider good. So being forced to where if I don't have an arsenal, I need to not block with anything on the chance of them having that transcend to just take a card from my hand makes it very difficult. And I'd faced a lot of different types of news on the Talishar client, and it was just getting to the point where it did feel like a cursed matchup. So I
Even
actually
with
ended up,
snags, eh?
even with the 2 snags.
You did actually go ahead and share a lot of your sideboard notes in the deck link. So in the description, people, if you want specifics on what Mark's doing, go ahead and check that out. But let's talk a little bit more broadly. Run through your sideboard list here. Just kind of bullet point it what everything's doing.
Okay, so we'll start off with the Pulping and Wild Ride. There are switch hitters in the deck. When you're going into these decks that have heavy D-reacts, you want to take one Pulping out and switch it for a Wild Ride. The Shade and Death Hydra I bring in with the Tear Limb from Limb, and those are for our fatigue matchups, our late game matchups, and for specifically of the Assassins, Uzuri. During the Road to National season, those cards together allowed me to cinch up some very bad early game matchups where I didn't see any Blood Rushes, didn't see any Artivores, so I leaned in to intentionally getting the Shaden, into Banish, flip Consumed, and just play a Shade and Death Hydra pumped up by Tear Limb from Limb for 26. And they look at me and go, "Can I read that Tear Limb from Limb?" It's like, oh, base. Oh.
Then you do have the Cloak, Grasp, and Hooves, the Spoiled Skull. That's the basic Kano package, right?
Yes, it is, generally. The Spoiled Skull is more used in other matchups. I actually bring that in for the Enigma matchup. It makes the deck feel so much better into that word heavy deck. That action allows you to either play an extra Wild Ride, Dread Screamer, Shadow Realm Horror, or Blood Rush, or Pulping, and you have all the options in the world now for it, and it has never felt better. I used it to end up chaining 3 Shadow Realm Horrors together in one game, and we can bring that up when we get to the matchups.
Oh my god. So then, lastly, you do have Savage Sash included as well. Where have you found matchup-wise that you really prefer this over Husk?
That is also tech for Enigma.
Enigma? Okay, yep, that's what I was finding. I still really, really value controlling your life thresholds with Husk more than being more consistent aggro deck when you do use Sash for its effect. But that's interesting because your list has cards that would gain more benefit. You can go wider with these Pulping and Wild Rides. Have you experimented with Savage Sash into more matchups just with the basis of your aggro core?
I have, but I haven't gotten enough testing in with it where I was comfortable making that choice at the tournament level.
Gotcha.
Husk is my, your baby, your safety net, your best friend when you're wanting to control your life total or, flip when you're not necessarily at a huge life lead. And so losing that in some of those aggro matchups just feels bad. A lot of people wanted to, bring in the Sash for Zen specifically to try
Yeah.
and like out aggro him. But the life, the life value, just having more life than Zen, I have found to be the most important thing in making that match 50-50 or better.
Yeah, and you're leaning into that obviously even with Scabskins. So you're just hitting this critical mass point of having oppressive armor. Zen specifically is one where I'm eager to test a little bit more though, because I think the Zens right now, a lot of them are moving like off of Mauling Chi. If they're throwing 6, it's like maybe just a CNC, but to take an off turn into Brute like isn't something they're always looking to do. They're always trying to be aggressive. And then does Karen Husk ever really get its value? I think we'll see how the Zen list shake out in this evolving Nationals metagame across the world. And honestly, if they're just not running enough like 5 or 6 power attacks, then I think that answers the question just baseline. But as of now, I'm with you, where I would just prefer having more life first. But if their attacks just don't even hit that high, then there you go. It kind of does the shift for you. But with that, let's actually talk about, now that we've seen the whole deck, heard you articulate the card choices oh so beautifully, let's hear about the run that you had overall, because this was a grueling event. This was 8 rounds of CC and 6 rounds of draft. So start off with round 1. Take us through it. You don't have to spend too long on too much, but we just want to know what happened.
Yep. So round 1, we had the KO, the Brute Mirror. And this is one of the few dice rolls I did win, and I made the KO go first. And the KO did something that, this is nothing against the player, but he sent a pulping. I got the block with the card, and then he sent another attack. And I happily gave him 2 more 6s and held onto the Shadow Realm Horror in my hand.
Oh.
And not gonna lie to you, it was pretty much off to the races from there. I was able to just run faster than he did. It's the brute game, brute math, brute numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So I cleaned that one up. He did take me to 5, but that was after a flip.
So it looks closer on paper than it probably felt. There's just you have so much control in the game once you flip like that. And KO is one of those matchups where I feel like it's very hard for you to miss the consume flip. Their damage isn't very evasive. They're not, squeaking in all these little 1s and 2s. You can pretty easily track like where their damage is coming from. And with your tall armor, you just always get the flip off. So generally, that's what I'm looking for. If you get the flip off, the game is that much easier. If you agree.
I'm 100% with you on that. The one thing that can screw you up is what the person at the Road to Nats did to me a while ago. Is he landed a cast bones when I was at about 17, and that allowed him to push me past that threshold. So good play gets good results.
Right. Well, Andrew Rothermel, who made the finals, wasn't running cast bones at all, so that might inspire a new wave of KO that just doesn't run that card at all. Because I found a similar thing as you. Like that was their one play they could really look for to try to mess you up, is having their own pivot turn preemptively cast bones into your life threshold where flip is critical. That was like truly the one play that could feel bad. And if they're running Andrew's list, they can't even do that. So we'll see.
Exactly. All right. So moving on to the next one, we have a Prism. And this Prism was on the Aggro plan into me, which I actually believe is the right choice into Levia, because trying to land that Arclight setup is very risky. I've played into a lot of Prisms recently, and you have to just pray that they don't have the super poppers when they go in with the Triumphs. And I leverage Husk in that matchup specifically for the first Triumph block, and I did that in about turn 2, I believe. And then once I saw Blood Rush Bellow, it was over. That low life threshold that Prism starts with at 32 is just very difficult. Is it 32?
Yeah, they start at 32. Yeah.
Yes, so it just it's too harsh for them. One blood rush takes them down so low that they get forced into doing their big combo thing with Halo. And it was just a clean win.
Sweet.
I used Husk and on that Triumph for a blood rush turn. I wish I had more to say on that matchup.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So you're 2-0 at this point. And how'd you feel? You know, like, did you feel the miracle run? Was everything like in control at that point?
I was feeling good, but I also had that sinking feeling in my stomach at that point. Two good matchups in a row. Where's
Right.
the new? Where's the bad matchup? And then, sure enough, round 3, we see the person who won the whole tournament.
Oh, Evan.
I
Really?
faced Evan, and as soon as he flipped up the needles, I had this sinking feeling in my stomach, like, oh no, that's bad.
Interesting. Interesting.
Because him not being on Kakara told me, oh, this is going to be a lot. So this game actually went pretty well, if I'm being honest. I did end up losing it, but I felt like I was in control for most of the game, but I made one misplay. I have a singular rule with Zen. Don't block with Scowling Fleshbag until after they block with Traverse.
Mhm.
And I broke that rule to try and send a double Blood Rush, which I did, to keep my health total up. I stayed at 20 with using the Scowling, and I sent, he was at 19, sent a full Blood Rush Bellow double of 7 Claw into 10 damage off of Boneyard Marauder.
Sheesh.
Took him all the way down to 3, which is unlucky. I wish it could have been 2, so he would have been in threat of Reckless. But then he played out a turn that just largest turn I've seen a Zen do in my experience, period.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
sent, I believe, 9 or 10 chain links at me.
Oh my
And he
god.
told me at the end of the game that the Rising Sun Setting Moon he played found the Art of War on top. So
Better lucky
sometimes,
than good, Evan. Better lucky than good.
and that's nothing against Evan. Like he played the game like about as perfectly as you could,
Mhm.
but I forced him to use the armor, I believe, at a time he didn't want to, but he found the perfect card off of that draw, and that was it. Off to the races. He sent over 30 damage at me, and that's all she wrote.
Jeez, unfortunate. Well, at least you were part of his legacy towards the top, and it wasn't some random Zen that you lost to. Specifically, though, in that matchup, how did you find the needles really interacted with Levia? Because I was surprised as well to see that he took those against KO in the finals. But what we saw happen in that game was that he used the needles to basically ensure that the KO opponent gave him cards, and it opened up Evan to have a bigger turn because the KO was on a smaller hand size. Like he used it to basically set this like tempo trade. It was very interesting. But for Levia, I feel like more than anything, Levia, maybe you have a really strong 2-card hand anyway. You've got your Endless Maw coming up or something like that where you are really looking to block with cards anyway. How did that really feel matchup wise?
It felt all right, but he did bait me into blocking with a card I didn't need to
Right.
take away the needle. And it's a mistake I hope to not make again because I do view it as a mistake. And yeah, it is a little mind game, similar to
Mm-hmm.
what I was talking about with pitching reckless swing, all of that kind of stuff, where you attack with that little needle and it's just weaving in with all of his other attacks. He's trying to bait a card out of your hand for like his Tiger Swipe coming up to try and make me give something I don't want to give up later.
True. Wow, that's a
And
good point. He's on like a more Tiger list, which is a lot more punishing with Tiger Swipe. The other Zen lists that made top 8 are just like dump, like, just bonds, descend it. But he can punish with actual on hits. Wow. Wow, Evan is such a smart little kid. Look at that.
oh, he
Nifty,
did
nifty.
awesome.
Yeah.
Like all the props in the world to him.
Oh, he's a
But
good
yeah,
friend of mine
that
as
was
well. So, props to Evan for the win overall. But that's a lot to learn actually. I'm eager to try that matchup myself moving forward. So you're 2-1 at this point. Um Sounds like you played a really great game though, so it can't feel too bad. It wasn't like a horrendous blood debt loss or something. You're moving into the last round of CC for day 1. What happened?
So this was the most awkward game of the tournament for me. It was against an Azalea, and it didn't start off awkward. It started off by playing the same way I would normally do it. I have rules for Azalea that are very simple. Only give the blocking armor pieces on hits that actually hurt my turns. I'll take the 2 blood rot. I'll take the 4 blood rot damage. But Red in the Ledger, Remorseless, we block those. We block those. But I got him down, rushed him all the way down to about 12 damage, I believe. 12 life. Yeah, I got him down to about 12, and then I started drawing some of my more awkward hands where I had to play a first cycle blue Dread Screamer into like a yellow Graveling Growl just to send 10. And it allowed him to just have that little bit of pressure to where he was able to get a fatigue shot up or a sleep dart up that I had to respect for those turns because I wasn't quite at the threshold for transforming yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up having to protect life and kind of find that final push where I could actually throw the final Blood Rush Bellow to kill him right after a flip. So it was a little difficult. It was hard to navigate that game, but it ended up working out in the end. Like, generally, Azalea is a favored matchup for me from my experience because they just don't have blocking cards. Once you get into that blocking cycle, they can't really match your damage and they end up folding.
Well, interesting, because you're not running any CNCs or send packing, so you don't even get kind of that extra annoying breakpoint push with blocking with Apex CNC for 7 type of deal. So do you find that with just more added aggression, you're racing that much faster and disruption never matters?
You end up sending more damage than the Azalea does, and so the only thing that matters is if their on hits hurt you. So they can pump up an arrow to 14 damage, 16 damage, and if that isn't going to cripple your turn, if you have the right hand, because it is a blocking when convenient matchup, like you block when it makes sense, you block when you have like your endless maul plays, you give 2 cards in Apex to like block out an 8 arrow or something like that. But ultimately, it's just you send more damage. If you send 18 damage at them and they send their, 12 damage, dominate, Blood Rot Arrow, you're still sending more than they can. And you have more block 3s in your deck. So when it gets to that late game, which is when the game really starts, you have an advantage.
That's an
and Shadow
interesting way
Realms
to
just
put
make
it.
that matchup so brutal. Like, if you hit off Shadow Realm, it's just nails in the coffin.
Yeah, they'll never. Well, Codex can get pretty gnarly, but it'll still never match. Yeah, what Shadow Realms do. Interesting. So you're 3-1 now. Day 1 CC is wrapped up. You can kind of speed us through the draft stuff. Just not the point of today's video, but obviously you did really well in draft. So how did those go?
So my draft ended up being I was pushed into new, which was convenient because I pick one to a blue majestic for new, the Prognosis. And I ended up having a very heavy reaction deck. Like, I had multiple like Venomous Bites and Hisses. And also Alluring Inducement, which is kind of cheaty. You can steal their blues. It's kind of funny. So I ended up running into a Zen, followed by a Zen, followed by a new mirror. And the Zens, I ended up killing them, both of them, with the "Do you have it?" And I said, "Yes, I have the red Venomous Bite." Good game.
Nice.
Venomous Bite, Fang Strike, game over. They were at 4. That happened with both games. And then in the new mirror, it was a nice little grindy matchup. And I did get the advantage of, banishing one of their bigger mystic attacks off the top. So I had kind of the chi advantage with like value in that game. But ultimately, I just got through, got that win, went 3-0 in that draft on day 1, finishing up 6-1 on day 1,
Incredible.
which felt great.
Oh yeah.
Felt great. It's the best I've done in a Nationals day 1. Last year, I just barely bubbled in to, day 2. This year, I got that X1 and felt pretty good about it.
Looking pretty strong. I remember looking at the standings, and there were a couple of eyes like still pretty live into day 2. So I was I was hoping that we saw on Rocket to the Top, but not gonna lie, Mark. I unfortunately was eyeing Chris Yali more than any other Levia player, just because of all the hype following the streaming he's been doing, and the ProQuest win and all that. So as I saw him start to sink, because his CC record only ended up being 4-4, I was losing hope until for whatever reason I like finally saw your name like right at the end of day two. So I didn't really scout out much of your day two, funny enough. So how'd that part go for us?
Yeah, so day two, I drafted new again, and I actually felt like it was a better deck, but I was facing better people,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up getting caught in draft in a few games. I got a little bit too greedy in my first round into a Zen. If I had blocked a little more heavily, been a little more defensive, I think I would have gotten there because I banished, I believe, like 3 powerful blues in the first like 2 turns. But like I said, got greedy. They got me. There's my second loss right at the start of the day. I then faced off against an Enigma, which is a very tough matchup in draft when you're on the new side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up fatiguing the new by taking all of their chi off the top of the deck and ended up knocking them down to just 2 cards, 2 chi. And I still had enough life to where I could just transcend, dagger, do an attack if I feel like it, drop one of their own wards there so they can't actually hit me with the spectral, and he gave me the win because he noticed he was in a lock.
Oh wow.
And then the third one, so I knew from the start, being in the draft pod with Mr. Nathan, that we were going to have some local on local fighting one way or another. It's just how it's going to go.
Mm.
Sure enough, round 3, I faced off against Nathan on Enigma, and I lost that game. That guy had the most defensive heavy deck I've seen for an Enigma, and
Yeah.
he, on one turn, he triple evasive leaped me to stop me from going to 12 on a double trouble.
Insanity. What?
And I'm just chuckling like, of course you've got it, Nate. Good game, brother. And he ended up getting me. Couldn't
Yeah.
even be mad though. It's a local, Third loss, I'm like, okay, I'm still doing good. Still all right. Not the right place to lose my third game, but
Mm-hmm.
we have CC, and CC's been treating me well. And she did. She did. So now we get back to the actual Levia games, and I got to face off against an aggressive Riptide.
Interesting. An X3 aggressive Riptide. All right. Well, I guess
Mm-hmm.
at that point it had been a lot of drafts, so who knows if the Riptide was really carrying it. Might have been a 1-3 Riptide.
Hey, who
Anyway,
knows? Who knows? But the Riptide, just the I took out the pulping, brought in the wild ride because he's gonna T-react all day when he
mm,
can. And we had an unfortunate judge call we had to make in that game. He hadn't used New Horizon as much as he wanted to practice, and he tried to load an Endless Arrow with Death Dealer. And I tried to be as respectful as possible. Like, hey, can I read Death Dealer? I just want to make sure that I know what's going on. And he's like, nope, that was illegal. And he called the judge over. And I think that one action hurt him heavily because he would have had a very solid turn, but that misactivation, I think, hurt him a lot that turn.
oh,
And he was only able to send a single arrow. It was a fatigue shot, which I took. And then I, started drilling into him, found blood rushes, and it's just kind of a deal where as long as you keep a life lead into Riptide, you can end up closing on him. It's actually one of the harder matchups, I think, for this deck out of the field. But being able to kind of have free reign on that one turn where he could have sent, I believe, it would have been him sending like 16 damage at me, turned down to only being 7. We move on. We were able to, clean through the Riptide. We beat the Green Tide. And then we had a pair of Enigmas. My
oh,
first one was actually against Michael Feng. Awesome dude, very gracious, very apologetic because he did have a lot of moments where he had to take a second to figure his plays out. He was apologizing to me, and I'm like, dude, you're fine. Like we still have 20 minutes left. We're on like turn 6. We're good. Like we're gonna get to the end. But I brought in those 2 equipment pieces that I talked about and essentially go full aggression into the Enigma. The game plan is kind of only block when you have a card that you're not going to be able to use, because there are no on hits in that deck aside from CNC. And when you see CNC, you can just, give, if you've already blocked with one of the armor pieces, an armor, the other one that's up for 2, and throw, a single 6 block in to get your extra like might in, because I don't bring Gambler's Gloves into that matchup because it's not necessary. But ended up getting an insane pivot turn when he got the Miragai out and domed me for 10 on one of the turns. But I didn't care because I had Wild Ride, Dread Screamer, Pulping, a blue in hand. And I just said, okay, pop Sash. And I just went Screamer, Wild Ride, into the Pulping, and then finished it off with a 1 cost from Arsenal for 0,
my God.
0 cost, and just sent 24 damage at him in 1 turn.
That's insane.
And that kind of sealed up the game. About 2 turns later, I popped my Spoiled Skull to try and get the Blood Rush. Ended up getting a Shadow Realm Horror, which was almost better in that situation because it was a break point. And I was able to close it out with about 5 minutes left on the round.
Dang.
Well, he took me all the way down, for what it's worth, he took me all the way down to 1.
Oh, wow. Okay, closer than I thought, even with such highs as that Sabotage play. Well done to Michael Feng. He's obviously an incredible pilot.
Great player.
Yeah, we missed him on the broadcast, unfortunately. I didn't even know he was on Enigma. But that means at that point, like you killed him effectively. Out of potential top 8. So look at that, Mark. You're taking names. But you said you played then another Enigma right at round 13.
That one was actually Rhea.
Oh my! Wow.
Yep.
You did not have it easy.
I looked at that. I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. Love your cosplay. Let's have some fun. I actually had a little more fun in the game with her just on the banter side, because she was literally playing as Enigma in her costume. And whenever it was Banish 6, no, not Banish 6, Banish 3, I would shuffle the deck and hand it to her. I was like, find the chi. And she just leaned into it, and we were doing the, quick reveal, quick reveal, quick reveal. Nice. And it just made the game very fun. Like, we had a great time. And that one was where I had that, I told you about the triple horror turn.
Yeah.
So I Spoiled Scold on a turn. It was Horror, Blood Rush, Dread Screamer. Hit the Horror, broke Sash from that point exactly. Horror, banished all 3. One of them was a Horror. So I played a Horror again. Banished 3. Didn't actually hit, another. It hit 2 out of the 3 because the Sash was hit. And then I remembered, oh, whoops, I should have, just let it go to the graveyard. So that time I did. I let both Shadow Realm Horrors go to the graveyard. And then I played my Shadow Realm Horror from hand. And from that point, Rhea said, good game. I can't block it. Don't even banish the cards.
Wow. Wow, you're having just a field day into these Enigmas, pulling off the highs of highs.
That was one of the decks I did a lot of testing into.
Yeah, well, absolutely warranted. You're making Tear Limb into Shaden look like chump change next to these turns. My goodness. So at this point, though, you are still X3, and you're going into your last round. Did you have any sense of like maybe you're still live for top 8? Because a couple X3s like we're gonna make it, or what was kind of your understanding of the top cut?
I actually didn't know that I was still live. I assumed that the timing where I lost my 3rd game in draft would have been kind of my death sentence. So I thought I was playing for that top 16. But I was still, playing hard. I wanted to finish out strong. I didn't know I was live until you actually told me, like in hindsight on that Sunday. And
yes, well, it was an unfortunate situation because going into round 14, there was a result that got reversed. Funny enough, including Nathan. Because of how that shifted things with the new pairings, or rather, with the fact that there weren't new pairings for round 14, they just rolled with the initial things. Your placement in what we were looking at standings-wise put you at maybe 8th with like the napkin math that we were doing with everything. But, however, with the result reversal, you weren't actually in like 11th or whatever it was when we were looking at it. You would have been a little bit lower. And that means it never was a win and in, unfortunately, for your round 14. But it looked like it with how the initial standings were posted on our end. So I definitely got over eager because I was watching your game, from my side, refreshing your game versus KO, refreshing, like, where's that match result? And then you won, and I'm sitting there, oh my God, a Levia just made top 8. But standings were not completely accurate. So I told the stream chat, I had messaged the League of Levia, like, I was freaking out. But unfortunately, you got 10th. But still, it was so close. And actually, I'm spoiling your last round anyway. You played a KO and you won. What happened in that game, Mark? Oh, God.
It was actually one of the most fun games on the day. I'm not going to lie to you. I called it the Battle of the Blood Rushes. I won the die roll, went first, and just looked at my hand and went, yeah, Arsenal Blood Rush pass. And then he just starts off firing right off the bat with his own Blood Rush. Used my Scowling, got some value, did the thing, sent my Blood Rush. He used his Scowling. I think I got a little more value off of mine because I don't know, I had like 2 cards in hand and both of them were playable 1 costs. So I was able to get the damage either way. And then right after that, he sends another Blood Rush. And I promptly, start throwing my armor in front. I send another Blood Rush at him, and it just ended up being that kind of a game where we both sent 4 Blood Rushes on the first, 2 turn cycles.
Oh boy.
Absolute riot. We're just both laughing our butts off, like, about the fact that we're just both high rolling to all hell. But Levia has a little more power cards than KO, so then I saw my Artivore, and I was able to, push that, damage that KO can't deal with after that, and ultimately ended up just kind of pushing through, doing the flip, and getting that. And then I drew a hand up when he went to 2 of, some blocking cards and a reckless swing and went, cool. And he sent his attack, and I went, okay, block here, go to reactions, reckless swing, and he goes, good game.
Very nice.
And
Very nice.
That's how it ends.
Wow. Well, what a roller coaster. It was, man, it was still just such a great showing, Mark. And to know that it came from someone who's been so dedicated to Levia for so long. We had Ilias at Pro Tour also make like a pretty deep run with Levia, but he jumped to Levia just because the deck was strong. You have been on Levia because you're a diehard. And so we love to see stories like this really pan out. And 10th is still absolutely incredible considering the event was like about 500. I think it was 474 was the final count. And you got freaking 10th, dude. So pretty incredible. Any last shout outs before we wrap up this video?
No, just shout out to the Michiganders, all of our crew. Shout out to all of my opponents. You guys were awesome. Like, I didn't have any games that even like remotely felt bad. It was so cool to actually meet Michael Feng and Rhea. You guys are great. And thank you, Ethan. Like, I actually, when I first got into Levia, like, I didn't even know you were a local of mine until I showed up at the wharf and saw you. I had seen your videos, and I was like, oh, okay, we have one person who actually, likes this hero, and that was how I got my start. So, thank you very much, man.
Very nice. Well, hopefully she continues to do you well. You are an incredible pilot, and I really like what this list has brought to us for this upcoming Nationals meta, freaking Pro Tour Amsterdam. Are you going to be there?
I am not going to be able to make Pro Tour Amsterdam, but I am trying to make the Worlds because I did get the invite.
Right.
But travel is tough.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay. Well, hopefully someone will carry your torch for Pro Tour Amsterdam and get her even closer. I mean, I'll take 9th, but really we're looking for that top 8 people. So with that, League of Levia, you'll find all the links in the description if you want those tokens that were on screen, if you want the deck list that Mark's worked on, all the matchup guide and all that. Everything's in the description. Join the Discord for all tips and tricks that have to do with Levia. And with that, I will see you in the next one.